based on the fact that during the campaign, right through to the end of the campaign, the energy and enthusiasm on the ground was palpable. This is a matter which really needs to be confronted by Jamaica's democracy, and certainly by our party going forward as to how we can try to respond to these types of tactics, which have become a central part of how our opponent operates in trying to secure power for themselves.
Let me just comment a little more on what the partner just said, which is that in Guyana, recently there was a general election in Ghana on September 1, we're all aware of that. Coming out of that election, the EU delegation, the European Union delegation, has issued a report. And when I read the report, I certainly complained of widely in the Jamaican situation. And that tells you that there are the question of the democratic process being legitimized is also a question of the various activities and the concerns and the issues that are raised that will affect the quality of the democracy. And I think that's a lot of the concerns that are being raised here and need to be pursued is around not just the specific legal aspects, but about some of the concerns and gaps that may have opened up in our electoral system that needs to be addressed.
Morning, Desmond Richards here, Rebel Radio. Mr. President, have you identified reasons why the party lost? And secondly, what are your concerns about the low voter turnout? And I would like to hear if the party has plans to encourage voters to hold their votes.
I would say that there's something perplexing about the voter turnout statistics, based on the fact that during the campaign, right through to the end of the campaign, the energy and enthusiasm and suggested that there would have been a stronger turnout. As indeed, the polls, right up to the last poll, which was published on the Sunday before the election, indicated that, based on the expressions of persons polled, they were expecting a significantly higher turnout. What happened on the day needs to be examined carefully. I think it was a combination of factors at play. I think that there were persons who didn't vote because the lines were long and slow, often in the hot sun, sometimes in the rain, and they got fed up and left. I think that the financial inducements of which I speak or have spoken were a major factor as well in dissuading some people from voting. In terms of why we didn't win the election, we lost it narrowly. If we had 4 more seats, we would form government today. And when we look at the seats that we have in mind, we lost all of those by less than 500 votes. And in all of those, some of the issues which I raised were prominent factors at play. So obviously I don't want to prejudge what the appraisal committee will say based on their investigations, but as I said, the low voter turnout is a bit of a mystery as to why that transpired, given what we know and what we saw and what we felt during the campaign. I would say one other thing, which is that the voters list itself has not been cleansed comprehensively for over a decade. I can't even remember when the last proper re-verification, early 2000s, so it's probably 2 decades now since that was done. And given the nature of our population, how people move around, move to other parts of Jamaica to seek work, and that sort of thing, and the people who die, and there's no automatic removal of voters on death. The number on the voters list from which the percentage turnout is derived is a questionable number. And so the voter turnout statistic itself is necessarily understated. The degree of understatement is what we don't know.
And if I may add to that, the People's National Party polled an additional 97,000 votes over the 2020 elections. The Jamaica Labour Party polled 5,000 more over that time. And as has been said, if you look at some of our areas, there was significant suppression that took place in some of our areas by person inducing individuals in there not to go to vote. And with the long lines that were present at the polling station, there is a question for the ECJ to answer. Because if we had a turnout of only 39% and we had such long lines with such delays, one should have to think what would have happened if the turnout had been 50%. Because significant delays took place on the day. I was on the phone from early with the director trying to resolve some of the issues. And you did have persons in those lines that turned away. So we lost 4 constituencies by less than 500 votes. Each of those constituencies have over 100 polling stations. It's just 5 persons in each is a significant thing, and I think we have to resolve how we do this thing. I was third in line at my polling station and didn't vote until, I was there before 7, didn't vote until about 10 minutes to 8 before I completed the exercise. That's just not acceptable in my opinion. So there was a decision that was taken that persons that showed up without ID should have been placed on a separate line, and that they should have started the process from outside with an additional agent. That did not obtain in all.
The problem. So I will go turn. So I think the planning has to be questioned and perhaps an audit is appropriate at this time as well.
Hakeem Oret, CBN TV. We've seen at rallies there are big crowds and a lot of support. Even with the big gains, how do you plan to keep the base energized after the back-to-back defeats, Mr. PNP President?
Well, after a campaign ends, there's a process of reflection. There are some reforms internally that we need to pursue as well to strengthen our overall organization. So the way in which we plan to handle the matter would be through a period of careful analysis of what took place and a recognition of where there are weaknesses that need to be strengthened, and the deliberate pursuit of changes that will strengthen those weaknesses. So, one doesn't energize the base from the start of a 5-year term of government. Energizing the base comes from the kind of process involved in campaigning. But what we need to ensure is that we stay in touch with our base, that we strengthen our constituents and divisional organizations, so that when the time comes, we're able to deliver an effective result. And we are starting now from a much stronger position than we have enjoyed over the previous 5 years. With just 14 in Parliament before, it was much more difficult. Only 14 MPs out of 63 were PNP MPs. Only 14 out of 63 PNP MPs got state resources through the Constituency Development Fund to help to do the work that they have to do. So it's moving from a very limited base in Parliament is difficult, and it required extraordinary effort to take us where we are now. With 28 seats to their 35, I mean, the situation is much more balanced, and that will enable us to build on that to be even more effective next time around.
But you also pointed out partly that there's the engagement in the field from now, the reviews. I believe, generally speaking, from my own constituency and from talking to others out of yesterday's meeting, that process of engagement will be helpful, because a lot of the concern and the sense of rejection that is there comes from some of these things complained of. And I think once you're on the ground investigating, giving people an opportunity to speak and to vent some of that frustration. I think that will be part of the process of healing and engagement. Part of the process of healing and engagement. So I think that process will be ongoing.
Morning again. Endorsing a couple of questions. One, given what you have described as acts of vote suppression, can you indicate whether or not the PNP has made a formal complaint about electoral fraud or irregularities to any state organ? And if so, in what constituencies? That's one. Two, can you indicate, sir, what is the projected spend for the People's National Party during this election campaign? Can you say also how was it funded and what percentage is corporate donation? And then finally, personally, Mr. Golding, is this disappointing for you, and if so, how disappointing?
So your first question was whether formal complaint has been made to any state organ in respect to the voter suppression of which we speak. The answer to that is no. We are, as I've said, going into the field to do a survey so that we can get more tangible information rather than the indirect reports that we have been receiving. Through the reports we're receiving is really through both things like social media, but also more importantly through the campaign structures that we have. But we want to go into the field and get more, a more comprehensive survey of what took place. At that point, we can decide, where we go from here. There isn't really any state agency that is mandated to address that issue. That's one of the challenges we have. So it's, that is something we'll have to consider carefully as the best way to proceed, to deal with this. Some of these things may require a strength this era relative to when that law was last amended or reviewed. Other things may just require an internal response as to how we manage that kind of process going forward. So that's my answer to your first question. Your second question was about campaign finance. Yeah. I haven't seen from our treasurer yet a final report on the level of funding raised and expended. Based on my assessment of it or knowledge of it, I would say most of the funding that we raised came from donors. Some are corporate donors, some are individual donors. And I'm very sure that they were within the overall envelope allowed by the law in terms of the limits. I can tell you that because I have a sense for the numbers, but I don't have the specifics. And the third question
Personally,
was about yeah, it's a mixed feeling. I feel pleased that we are on the up and up, that we've managed to double the number of MPs that we have in Parliament, that we are going to have a team in Parliament now that is going to be formidable as an opposition, given the people who won. And we have an excellent team. And the fact that we got 97,000 more votes this time than we got in 2020 is also significant as an increase. Our opponents got 5,000 more votes. So it was a definite improvement in our performance. Disappointment at the same time that we weren't able to deliver that final, 5 additionals, probably 4 that we needed to just have 32, which is the threshold for winning. That was disappointing. And when we look at the seats that we thought we would have won and didn't, we have to look carefully at why we weren't able to prevail there. I think that the reasons for that were more to do with factors that took place on election day itself and maybe the night before or 2 nights before, rather than the campaign as a whole. I think the campaign as a whole, we ran a pretty exemplary campaign. I think it was a much more active campaign than our opponents. in terms of presence on the ground and meetings and rallies and the attendance of those rallies. I think our manifesto was delivered in a reasonable time so people could digest it and was well received. I think that our performance in the election debates, where most people feel that we won each of the 3 debates, was also significant and helped us along. But you know, we weren't able to actually cross the line first because things went on, as I said, the very end of the process, which we were not able to respond to effectively on the day. And for that, you know, we must all take some responsibility, including me as party president. Is there somebody determining who speaks?
Yes,
Morning, gentlemen. What positives can you take from the campaign? Excuse me. Yes. What positives can you take from the campaign? And what are your views generally about your team, the team you put together? Okay, it's a bit disappointing to lose, obviously, but when you reflect back, to say 5 years ago, from where you came from there to where you are now, what positives? And secondly, what plans do you have to bolster your treasury? You're definitely a political force in this country, again, and maybe perhaps the treasury angle of it will get you over the line, maybe possibly next time, but you have to have an effective treasury if you're fighting a campaign in the 21st century. So what do you see going forward? How do you entice, say, the business community, other people to bolster that treasury campaign?
Yeah, in terms of positives, I think that we now have a united party. We have a team that is working together and has worked together well throughout the campaign. I think that the organization as a whole is strong. That's not to say there aren't areas that need improvement, there are. But we did significant training, for example, of our workers over the last several months. And we were really building on the success in the local government elections in February 2024, where we won the popular vote quite handsomely there. And we ended up with six municipal corporations and the city municipality of Portmore making 7, which is the same number as the JLP have, but we have one more division than they do. So there's been a kind of process over the 5 years of building an improvement, which I think was reflected in the 97,000 additional votes that we got and the budget. Anyway, we weren't seeking to do that. That's not a strategy that we employ. But in terms of being able to pay our media houses for the advertising that we had booked and developing that advertising and paying our party workers, for their efforts and the paraphernalia and so on that we were able to hold our own. And going forward, we will just be encouraging Jamaica to understand the importance of maintaining financial balance in how they fund political parties, because if one party has excessive resources relative to the other, it can affect the democratic outcome of elections quite easily. So these are the sort of arguments that we impress upon donors, and we've been we get good response for the most part. So I don't have any issue really there with the fundraising.
Yes, good. All right. Greetings to all at the press table. President MG, this one is for you, sir.
Who is this?
I am Baba Tunde's Stargate Communications. Before I get into my questions, I would just like to start by saying there are some things that you initiated that changed the experience for the Rastafari community. especially from the ganja experience and all. Only more than if you do, you know. But we must acknowledge when positive moves make that knowledge that. So we kick off the part. So the first question, seeing all what we see now, maybe some 8-9 days after the election, was the People's National Party fully prepared? I have two more. I don't know if I have to pause and answer or I go with the other two again.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we didn't ultimately win the election suggests that there are areas where our preparation could have been stronger. You know, I think that what we have come to realize going through this experience is that some of the tactics that we have to manage are not normal orthodox in the book tactics, but are things that are being deployed quite effectively by our opponent, which we haven't yet, I think, mastered a methodology of responding to. So I think I would say what would you regard as an orthodox way in which campaigns are conducted and way political organization is done, we were ready. But in terms of specific seats, which those tactics were being deployed, our response to them was inadequate.
All right. So in your preparation going forward, it's a little bit of small advice that you don't have to pay for. Art of war must be studied. Next question for you now, President MG. The positive way forward, and there are aspects of your manifesto that are tangible and excellent, but plans are in place. So not to wait till 2030, but to one, empower the people and to implement where it can. Much appreciated for listening. You got those?
Yeah, I mean, in response, I think that I need to actually say something about that. Our manifesto was our series of policy proposals and programs that we intended to roll out during the first five-year term that we were in government. Those things required being in government to be rolled out. An opposition party gets no state resources to implement plans and programs. We get a modest stipend as MPs to run a constituency office, and that's it. And then there's the CDF, which is a modest sum which hasn't been adjusted for inflation for many years now, of 20 million a year, out of which 1.5 million pays an administrator. So it's 8.5 million to be spent in a constituency with residents typically exceeding 40,000 people. So, you know, I don't want to pretend that the opposition will be in a position to roll out things like the First in Family Scholarship or build 50,000 housing units at an affordable price for people, or to implement rent-to-own to enable persons who are currently excluded from the mortgage market to become owners of their own home, or indeed a disability fund, help persons with disabilities with $1 billion in it, and those sort of things. Those are things we wanted to do if we formed government. What we will be able to do is individual MPs who have won will be able to pursue their own particular set of policies that they had brought to the people. You know, some of them will take time, won't happen overnight. Resources are always an issue. And to the extent they're able to garner additional support through creative methods of fundraising and using the goodwill of people who might want to support those initiatives, that will determine how quickly they can do what they want to do. But it's going to be more on a constituency and an MP level that things, you'll see things happening rather than nationally, because an opposition party is not able to, or indeed expected to, implement national policies. That's for the government of the day.
Just two more, one for Anthony Hilton and one for you, Mr. Golding. Mr. Hilton, you put forward the suggestion comparing Jamaica's electoral process to that of Guyana, which has a history now of concerns about the process, whereas here in